I'm Paul Arnold. If it's not too grandiose a title, I'm a bit of a polymath because on the one hand, I'm a trained psychotherapist, but then I've also spent a career in the advertising world doing strategic planning. I train a lot and also facilitate. And this session is all about how do you facilitate meetings? Now, I've actually facilitated hundreds of strategic workshops. Frankly, some have gone better than others, and there's a lot which I've learned about what makes the difference that makes the difference. And basically what I want to talk about is there are two fundamental things you've got to look out for. There's the logistics, and that's like pretty bog standard stuff, and I'm going to do that second because the most important thing is the people side. Now, there are two types of facilitation I've noticed. There is what I call process, in other words, where you are brought in to basically go and help facilitate their thinking, and they basically own the content. And it's only up to you to guide them to find their own answers, which for me is the most powerful space to work in. And then some people want you to come along and like drive the content. Well, that for me is a slightly different brief, and that's a much more of a strategic planning exercise, which I can do, but I think it's very clear up front. You have absolute clarity what's being expected from you. Now, in the people, there are two sides. There is them and there's you. And the very first thing is you've got to be really clear who the people who are coming in the room are. Who are the stakeholders? And remember, the word stakeholders means they've got a stake. There's something important here. And I think it's really important that before you even run the meeting, that basically you have had pre-sessions with every one of the people who are attending, or at least the key stakeholders, because you really got to understand how do they see the situation. And I take that strategic planning tool, the task map, and I say, what do they currently think? What do they currently feel? And what are they currently doing about it? And then actually the key thing is, what is the deliverables? What do you want people to walk away from the workshop thinking, feeling, and ultimately doing? And then critically, when you're looking about where's the objective, where do they want to get to, I think a really important question to ask is, what's the barrier? What's getting in the way? Why haven't they already got there? Because when you get to hear those on an individual basis outside of the meeting, sometimes you get to hear what is really stopping this from going on. Because very often, this isn't the first time they've done a workshop about this. I also think it's really important to have a problem owner defined. So someone who in the meeting you can go to, who can actually help sort of guide the process through in case you need it. Now, what I think you've got to do is, so let's talk about some of the specifics about the people in the room. Look, very often there's a whole bunch of emotions that are going to come into that room. There's going to be the emotions of anxiety. There's going to be emotions of frustration. They could be thinking it's a complete waste of their time. There could be some annoyance with some of the other members in that team. So all these things, you basically, when you come in there, you've got to recognize there's a lot of emotions in that cauldron, and you've got to learn how to hold that. And you've got to create a safe space that people feel is okay. And we talk about psychological safety. This idea that basically people can feel they can express what they need to say. And that's why we always talk about the contracting. Now, how to be in this space. What is acceptable? And once that's agreed and it's written up, at least then you can go back to, hold on, are we really still delivering and honouring what we said in the contract? I think that's really important because you've got to hold this space. And I think when you're in there, you've got to be hyper vigilant upon what's going on. Sure, you've done the pre-planning and you worked out the exercise, and that's all great. But I think you've got to be absolutely flexible. You've got to be like on a surfboard. You've got to be constantly moving and sensing what's going on. You're aware of like, that person has sort of checked out. That person seems to be angry with that person. That person is asking very sort of, aggressive, questions to other people or to yourself. People are questioning what is the process. And actually all these things you've got to therefore take on, hear it, and then adapt to it. And this is where the real skill comes in. And I often say that, to quote that famous Einstein quote about that to solve the problem cannot be solved at the same level that it was created. And very often you've got people coming into that room who are holding certain roles, certain personas, and actually, if you're not careful, when that all gets to be recreated and reenacted in that space, you're never going to be able to move it on. So part of your job is the ability to somehow break some of those and allow new thoughts and expressions to come into the room. And that's what you've got to do. So you've got to really open up the thinking, and very often that's where I draw upon all my strategic training. I may be doing inversion, I may be doing 5 whys, but one of the things is that I really invite you to do is particularly if you're an outsider, you have the right to call things. I notice what's going on in the process when we're trying to come to some agreement here, or what's not being said. So very often I'll do what's the elephant in the room, get everyone to write it down privately, give it to me, I'll write it on the board, and then we can have an open discussion. These are all critical things that you need to go and do. Okay, so how to be, I think, when you are facilitating these things, it's a strange thing to say, but it's really all about you. And it's about you need to engender the trust. There's a very famous person who's called Byron who talks about the basic assumptions. And when we work into groups, if they don't trust you and feel you're going to take them to where they need to get to, then they will sometimes rebel against you. So actually you have got to have this aura of calmness, confidence, you need to be untriggered. So when stuff comes up to you, you realize it's their stuff, it's not your stuff. And you've got to be able to hold the emotions, hold this, as I said, that cauldron of different emotions and be able to deal with it. At the same time, you've got to be very open and curious. Very much you've got to be taking this approach of curiosity, having the courage to maybe question stuff, but do it in a very open, I'm really interested why you see that. You're not to have up the answers, but what you are meant to do is you've got to break the paradigms. You've got to break their thinking free. Obviously, one of the things you've got to do is you've got to be deeply respectful, and these are all very senior, seriously qualified people. And as such, they know their business better than you do. And, if you are somehow sitting in some lauded higher place, they will sense that because the non-verbal communication is so powerful. So actually, it's really important that you really do recognize that they own the problem and they own the answer. And all you're trying to do is to help have a process to get them to where they need to get to. I think obviously, with any situation, it's about positivity, that there is hope, that we can do something about this. And as I said before, you've got to be very quick-witted. I do recommend a good night's sleep beforehand, and keep all the toxins out of your body, because you need to be very quick-witted. You need to be able to actually hear what's going on, be flexible, because whilst you do have an agenda, you do need to be flexible on that agenda. You need to follow where the energy is going and be prepared to park that and say, hold on, let's really focus on what John said just then. And as I said, I think you've got to be bold. You've got to be prepared to ask the questions that others dare not ask.